All right, I finished off my fur layer and I think I'll supply that to you. So I will come to insert a file. I'm in 08 practice files from the Drippy Cat Art Studio, and I've got Lunar Stripes Furry. It's a simple PNG image. Bring it in, it drops in right where it's supposed to be, and okay, it came in on the Draw Here layer. The rule is when you're importing things, whatever layer you've got selected, if it's empty, your imported layer will drop straight in on top of it. If there's something already on that layer, it will create a new layer above. To be on the safe side, I'm going to tap on the icon where I'm circling. I will come to rename, and I will rename this to Stripes. And I want a new layer, but I want the layer I'm painting on to be sitting underneath the stripes. So come to the plus sign, create a new layer, drag it underneath, and I'll call this Paint. Now the other thing I'm going to do is to come up to my layer 4. Come on, let's rename this to Colors. Let's give it the spelling that most people are likely to recognize. And just before I start, there are a couple of extra colors I want to add to this palette. So I will choose my hard blocker inner brush from the general brush set. I will come over to my palette and I'm going to click on cards because I want a couple of colors. I want burnt umber. Put that just underneath. And I also want, now whereabouts is it? I think it's the 4th pigment set, TC Pigments 4. I also want sepia. Tend to use that quite a bit when I do traditional watercolor painting. It's almost the same, but it's a little bit less saturated. All right, so come back to paint and let's get started. I am going to be using a lot of different watercolor brushes. I've got watercolor brushes 1, 2, textures. Yes, I might use that as well. Later on, I might use watercolor stamps. So let's try starting with something simple. Let's try DC Simple Round. And all I want to do is just put down some of these basic colors that I can see with Luna. And I'm going to start off with third color along, that kind of browny sandy yellow. My opacity is set 40%. Okay, I'll go with that. My brush size, no, let's take a look at this. No, I need something bigger than that because I want to lay down big areas of color. What's this, size 20%? Yeah, okay, that can do. Now, while I'm putting down colors, I may choose something a little bit more colorful for Luna's coloring. And the reasons I'm going to do that are, when you do a fairly loose watercolor, which I'm going to be doing, you don't have to obsess about getting the exact right color. You might want to play a few games. You might want to make things a little bit more colorful. You might want to experiment with your hues a little bit. And also later on, I want to use one of the glazing brushes to show you how you can affect the color quite easily afterwards. So let's put down a few colors, especially around the nose area. Definitely see some of these yellow colors around there. What about the fur itself? Yeah, I can see some colors coming down here. A little bit around here. There's also some in the upper area. I'm going to take the opacity down to what, 18%, really low, and to do an overall covering. A little bit underneath. I can always knock these back. I can always erase these colors. I will definitely be adding colors on top. But okay, I've got that. Let's try that sepia color, slightly less saturated, and just put down a few dabs of color here and there. I'm not being precise with this. I just want a general coverage. And this is going to get edited quite a bit afterwards. Definitely more in the fur area. Maybe try a little bit of a burnt umber next to it. It gives a slightly different feel. What I would like is the colors lying on top of each other so they're interacting with each other. Zoom in a little bit on Luna's face. Make my brush size maybe a little bit smaller because there's a definite area around here underneath the eye. She's got that thing a lot of cats have, and big cats, where you get this light patch of fur around the eyes. Oh, mustn't forget the other side of the eye. Doesn't matter if I go over, like I have done, beyond the area of the sketch. Need a little bit of something darker underneath here as well. If I put down my bits of colour like I'm doing now, and then I started doing the stripes, so often you find those areas of colour that you've put down end up being a little bit too light. Then you have to go in and make the colours darker. That's not a problem, you can do that. But I'm finding those dark stripes are giving me something to balance how dark these colours are. Now, one thing I will do straight away, now that I've put down a few bits of colour, is come to my smudge brush. For this, I'm in the Blend and Glaze brush set and I'm using DC Crunchy Smudge. The opacity is on full because I want to start blending these areas, and that brush is a little bit small. Let's make it a little bit bigger. At this stage, I just want an overall colour feel to this. That said, I'm probably going to start coming in with one of the more interesting brushes. This is a good basic brush, just to lay down these general areas of colour. But I don't want anything too distinct, not just yet. That will happen soon. I'm going to choose, I think that's burnt sienna, because I want to add a little bit more interest just around the nose area. Like I say, I'm playing a few games with the colours for the sake of interest. And yeah, that's yellow ochre, I think. And I'm finding that the burnt sienna mixing with the yellow ochre and also with the sepia and whatever, it's giving me some interesting colours while I'm up here as well. This colour here, come on, let's take a look at some of these colours. I think I'm using raw sienna plus the burnt umber and the sepia. So a little bit of Payne's grey in there. But also I'm using this quinacridone violet, and I want to use that in the ear area because I'm seeing some pink in the ears. That's very much luminous colours. And I'm making sure I'm getting a spread of colours around here. The colours are merging into each other. That can all be refined later on. A little bit down here. Also, there's a little bit under the mouth area. If I make my brush size a little bit more precise, smaller. Let's put some colours down there a little bit bigger with this brush. I don't want to start doing too much detail, not just yet. And also under there, am I seeing, I'll try a little bit of Payne's grey just underneath there, just to tone that colour down a little bit under the chin to provide a bit more definition there. Take a look at the top area. These colours mixing together are giving me some reasonable approximations of luminous tones. Let's try using Simple Round. Now for some reason these things have swapped themselves around a little bit. DC Simple Round Deep. This will give me a similar effect, but you can see it makes things darker a bit quicker. That's what I want. Bigger again. And yeah, this is giving me the kind of colours or the kind of colour depth that I want. And be pretty crude with it in some areas like this, because there are a couple of brushes that are going to do nice things with these brushes. Let's throw in a little bit of sepia so it's not too blue. Now let's try DC Burnt Ragged Edge. I'm still using sepia. Let's take a look at some of these eye areas, because having lots of big broad colour areas, that's nice, but yeah. That's giving me something a little bit more precise, but it's giving me a little bit more of that slightly ragged, watercolory type edge. which is what I want. But one thing I will do with this is come back to my smudger, DC Crunchy Smudge, and I want to just blend some of these edges, not all of the edges. I still want that crispy feel along the edge, especially around areas around the eyes where you can see a pretty sharp edge. But I want the other side of the brush stroke, if you like, the not so important side of the brush stroke, to blend in, because that is emulating how a watercolor brush can work. It's like if you put a paint stroke down, which is partially on dry paper, but also on wet paper as well. The dry paper will keep the edge of the brush stroke, but then when it goes to the wet area, it'll start to merge with the colors underneath. Let's do a couple of crispy edges just around here, around the ears. For the sake of interest, it looks interesting to the viewer when they see all of these different patterns starting to emerge. In fact, I might make that a little bit bolder, maybe a little bit smaller, to get one or two crispy edge details just around here, so that it looks more like one particular style of watercolor. These brush strokes are starting to merge with the black stripes. That's what I want. What I don't want is a whole lot of very pale watercolor brush strokes sitting on top of a very dark set of stripes. I want the colors to play with each other a little bit, or the tones to play with each other a little bit. I don't want to have two separate paintings in one. You know, the kind of thing, very dark stripes, very pale watercolors. And that can look nice, but I don't want it for this picture. So what have I got here? I'm starting to get what I want. This is very much a work in progress. Let me just blend a few of these shapes in, keeping hard edges where I want them, fading them where I don't. Like just here, I've got a slight bit of darker pink just showing through, which I do quite like, so I want to keep that brush stroke, but maybe just around some of the edges here, I want to fade those. So I've got faded areas plus sharper areas. That should hopefully give me a good effect. And the more you do this, the more you'll start to say, well, I like one particular hard edge, but I'm not as keen on another hard edge. And you get to blend things in as you see fit. All right, that is giving me more of what I want. I think it needs a little bit darker around the chin area. In fact, let's come back to, well, okay, DC Burnt Ragged Edge, that's good. Let's try some Payne's Grey. Let's take a look at that mouth, because I think that does need a little bit more defining. And this hard edge, yeah, that's working for me, I think. Maybe make it a little bit deeper, so I'm getting some slightly bolder brush strokes. Also the underside of the chin, that does need defining. So I'm going from big broad areas of colour to more defined areas of colour. And come to my blender again, because I want part of this to blend in. So I'm getting this interplay between the darker areas and the lighter areas. I think I need to take my brush, I'll come back to DC Simple Round Deep, opacity set low, brush size fairly small, because there's also even less opacity than this. I'm on what, 14% opacity, and I want just this area around here not to be completely white. I want to give the idea of a little bit of shading so that I can define the side of the mouth, but also I'm going to come back to, was it raw sienna? Add a little bit more here. Add a bit on top, let the colours play with each other. And again, come back and I want to blend where I need a soft edge. Now that burnt umber, let's come back to that, because I can see around the nose area that needs a little bit more deepening to bring out a little bit more definition in that nose area. A little bit on the other side. All right, I think I've got to a certain stage with this. Well, I say that, I'll keep on noticing various bits that I want to work on. But that is my first stage. This is going to change as we go further down the line. But for now, put down my basic color areas. Let's start to refine this in the next video.